Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Use code DNVR when you sign up for a new account to get amazing odds boosts every single day. The whole gang, Rudo, AJ, Jesse, and Megan here. As over the weekend, the Matthew Tkachuk trade did go down, and not just with a little whisper. The thing was an absolute banger from top to bottom for both teams, to be honest. There was quite a lot of chatter about it, so we're going to get into it, talk about it, see how it affected both teams and potentially the whole league. As I saw a tweet from Steve Dangle, which is where I want to start. When was the last time two 100-point players got traded for each other?
That was my immediate reaction. I was like, what? How often did we ever see this? It was crazy, man.
I genuinely don't remember the last time that has happened.
Before we get into this, man, where was everybody when it happened? Because it was like 9 o'clock on a Friday night.
Yeah, I was chilling at home, so it wasn't too bad for me. I was like, oh, sweet. Cool. I'm actually at home for one of these.
I was out somewhere, and I just happened to look at Twitter. I mean, less than a minute after all of this was like starting to break, and the 100-point thing didn't even come to mind immediately. But it was more of just like that just wasn't what I was expecting for this Tkachuk trade. Like I wasn't expecting it to be big name players going back the other way. Like MacKenzie Weegar is like, again, kind of like in the same way that we talked about Gerard a couple of years ago, where probably not any realistic Norris buzz, but like he's had a couple seasons where it's like when you dig into the numbers, it's like, yeah, this guy probably should be in some Norris conversation. I mean, there was all the stuff going on with Huberdeau this last year, and Dom and all that stuff with the MVP. I mean, either way, he was at the very least in that conversation. And to just see two players like that going the other way for a player like Matthew Tkachuk, I was floored.
It really was just how big the trade was, right? Because when it starts to break, you see, oh, Matthew Tkachuk got traded, and you're like, okay, well, that was coming. We knew that. Oh, it's to Florida? That's a little weird. Oh, it's for Florida's entire hockey team? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
AJ, where were you? What happened for you?
Oh, I was, Z and I were at the drive-in movies, and we were about 10 minutes into the Minions movie, The Rise of Gru.
Yeah.
And
you dress up?
No, neither one of us had any interest in seeing that movie. We were there because we wanted to see Nope, which was the second half of the double feature.
Oh, nice.
So we were not. Neither one of us was paying attention. I kind of actually watched it. I was able to recount the plot of it later on. But yeah, that was our main focus of it. Was we were there to see Nope, and then the Tkachuk trade kind of dominated the Minions movie experience for us.
Yeah. I just want to put this out there. In the first Despicable Me, the Minions, like, they're like the ultimate example of like, yeah, they're great to be part of a movie.
Yeah.
It's gone a bit overboard.
Yeah.
A bit.
That's controversial.
Big Minions guy 10 years ago. Now it's like,
It's
not about it.
The way adults have taken the Minions is unusual.
It's unusual is the great
It's uncomfortable.
This was not made for us.
Yeah.
Well.
But yeah, no, I mean, honestly, it had vibes of the Taylor Hall, PK Subban, Steven Stamkos.
That was the wildest 20 minutes ever.
Well, and it was just like this was like kind of the thing that like kind of most closely reminded me of that, where it was just like a holy smokes, like just kind of threw everyone off guard. No one was expecting it to go down like that. Yeah, no, I mean, good for Calgary to find a way to spin this summer into something that at least looks in the realm of positive right now.
Yeah, we'll get into both sides of it, of course. Megan, what was your immediate reaction, or did you even see it break?
Oh, I saw it broke, but I was unsurprisingly at home not really doing anything. But I got so excited by this. I was like, should I go out? Should I do something? It energized me. But it's mostly because I remember looking through Twitter and kind of seeing the Calgary fan base's reaction before all of this has happened. Because they obviously, Gaudreau is gone and there's trouble brewing with Tkachuk. And the Calgary fan base was kind of like, and we haven't really done anything outside of this. And then this happens. And I think, all right, this is a redemption arc for Calgary this offseason. I don't even find myself championing Calgary very often, but I was like, this is going to make some changes. Not sure. Like, Florida's a little bit in a pickle, but this is so good for Calgary.
So let's start there. It sounds like the two of you, and obviously you can't say properly who won the trade until much later. Today, did Calgary get the better end of this deal?
So I'll start because I know there's, like you said, it's going to be hard to like ultimately tell. But for me, honestly, like this is one of those. Like, in my opinion, Calgary won the trade kind of regardless. This feels a lot,
especially given the spot they were in. Sure,
and that is why. Given the way this summer was going, I look back at Columbus from a couple of years ago when they swept Tampa in the first round. Everybody knew what was coming at the deadline. Everyone knew they weren't going to be able to keep these guys. It was probably in their best interest to just move on and cave to the rebuild. And they said, no, we're sticking to our guns. In fact, we're doubling down on it. They go and they bring in Matt Duchene, and they end up going on a really fun run that's, it's a memory forever for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And their fans. Now, they may have set up like what ends up being the NHL's next dynasty, but, it turned into something undoubtedly positive for that organization forever. And to me, this is a similar situation. It looked like we were looking at a Calgary tear it down and rebuild, and they found a way to spin themselves up regardless of what they do with Huberdeau and Weegar, which I'm sure we'll get into the contract stuff. They found a way to make this a positive summer. It's going to be an interesting year. That whole team is going to have somewhat of a chip on their shoulder, playing with a little bit of extra jump. Those two guys abandon us. We're going to go out and show them. I think this is a running away huge win for Calgary. And I think it could turn out well for Florida too. But I think regardless of what happens next, is a huge win for Calgary.
Okay, Jesse, big on Calgary. How about you two? Same boat, or are you a little more positive about Florida, or possibly more negative towards Calgary?
Megan?
I still think that Calgary, at least for right now, because they took some calculated risks. Like, we don't know what the future for Weegar after this season will hold for Calgary, but if they chose to extend, it would, obviously we're talking into the future now, but it would be such a win for Calgary. And Florida still has some cap trouble that they need to sort out. So I feel like even though it's not a direct result of this trade, there are probably going to be some more pieces that Florida has to lose when this is all said and done, that it's a little easy for me to say Calgary.
Okay, 2 check marks for Calgary.
How do you feel about it?
I would feel a lot better about it for Calgary if there was an extension in place for either of the two main pieces. Even without that, knowing they had to move Tkachuk, I think it's great business. Obviously, they get the prospect and a first on top of Weegar, which is where I really go like, okay, Florida, that's a lot to give up. But look, I think Matthew Tkachuk is going to be fantastic in Florida. I don't have any faith in their defense anymore, though. I just don't know what Florida is going to do on the defensive end, which we'll get into. But the trade, while a banger, I think does make more sense for Calgary, even if there are still some question marks there for me.
I think it's one of the more interesting trades that we've seen in a really long time, because typically when a star player gets traded, we talk about how the team who gets the best player in the deal usually ends up winning it. Usually ends up pretty happy. The trade deadline can kind of muddy those waters a little bit because is Florida happy with the Ben Sherratt, Claude Giroux deals now, knowing what they know? Probably not. Is Colorado thrilled with their deadline deals? Of course, they're over the moon. But like, when is the last time that a team got a star 100-point player this early in their career, and you can argue that they lost the deal?
Yeah.
Like it's really kind of because I think Matt Tkachuk's the best player in the deal. He's 24 years old. Yeah. He's on a contract that I think is just fine. I have no issues with the deal at all.
You get his entire prime. Yeah.
And yeah, like I think him next to Barkov, they're going to be nasty. But are the Panthers better replacing Huberdeau with Tkachuk? Probably. Are they better replacing Huberdeau and Weegar with Tkachuk? I don't see how you make that argument. I expected Weegar to be in the deal, but when it was Huberdeau, because I was curious how they were going to make the money work, I figured they were going to give up picks, prospects, Anton Lundell, Spencer Knight, and try and shoehorn Hornquist into it, right, to make the money work. To just go with Huberdeau was like, oh, okay. So I thought it was pretty. Wild, honestly. That Matt Tkachuk is. I think for me, he's the best player in that deal, but he's a 1-to-1 replacement for one of the guys that they got in return. But the Flames lose Johnny Gaudreau and Matt Tkachuk in a week and end up with Jonathan Huberdeau and MacKenzie Weegar. Like, are they better? No. Are they more balanced? Yes.
Well, on Calgary's side, I think part of the reason you feel really, really good about Weegar is they already had a fairly solid defense when it's healthy.
Yeah.
Anderson, Tanev, when he's healthy, very, very solid. Probably lacking a little bit of that true top-end guy, but that's what Weegar can bring you.
Yeah, so, and a two-way guy. Not a, hey, this guy is going to be used. This guy scores points. This guy plays defense. Mm-hmm. This guy scores points. He does both. And especially in transition, if they let him do his thing, and he's able to start a transition game going the other way, I think he's going to be a really, really good fit for them and a really important player. And for me, I think he's probably the most important part of this trade because losing him, Florida gives up a guy that they haven't replaced, who's very, very good. And in getting him, the Flames do what we did last week, which was they picked a direction. They said, we want to try and stay competitive. They get a decent prospect and a first-round pick several years down the road. Right. Because of conditions involved, that pick could end up being 2026's first. Like, that would be – which would be – who knows? Who knows? Right. Who has any idea how good the Florida Panthers? I would have no faith whatsoever that the Florida Panthers are any good in 2026. Even Matt Tkachuk might be the last guy standing in 2026.
I mean, like the Avs just won the Cup, and if you told me that they traded their 2026 first, you're like, I don't really know where that's going to be.
There.
Yeah. The next couple of years, you're like, whatever. End of the round.
Obviously, some of these are RFAs, but the Florida Panthers have 3 guys signed through 2026 right now. So their team could genuinely look completely different.
And for the record, I bet if you went through every team's cap sheet.
Yeah, right.
Not many 2026 commitments are on them.
But that's the point of how far away that truly is.
Definitely. I do think that it makes Calgary's defense better. And when you have Markstrom in net, and look at their forward core is still going to be good. It's not like Jonathan Huberdeau is a bum. Guy can play. He's not great defensively, but we'll see how he does in that system and playing with that group. But he should continue to be Jonathan Huberdeau. He should continue to be a high-end scorer for them. And as close as they could possibly imagine to replacing the production lost from Gaudreau and Tkachuk, who are 200-point guys. To replace 200-point guys with a 100-point guy and then a top-pairing defenseman, it's given the situation that they were in, it's pretty good work. It's pretty good work.
I know he was traded for Tkachuk, but mechanically, based on style of play, you drop Huberdeau in, and he does exactly what Johnny Gaudreau did for that team for years.
Same playmaker, not as much as of a goal scorer as Gaudreau, but same style of playmaker.
So, I mean, are you now with, and maybe we're eventually going to get here, so we can hold off on this, but like looking at Calgary's cap friendly, they still have a little bit of work to do. Like they've got some money to spend. Obviously, there'd have to be an interest there from both sides, but I mean, like, are they maybe now looking at Nazem Kadri and saying, "Hey, look, we're trying to make a push here. Come play in the middle of Jonathan Huberdeau and Elias Lindholm"?
Well, I think it's tough because Lindholm's best successes come at center.
Yeah,
and Kadri's not been a very good wing when in the limit. Obviously, it's limited, but in the limited time that he's been a wing in his career, he just hasn't been as good as when he's been down the middle. So you probably are talking more like Kadri being your 2C behind Lindholm, and that being that conversation. The thing is that at center they were okay.
Yeah,
and then but losing their two top wings, that's what kills you. And Kadri doesn't really address that. He just gives you center depth, which is always a good thing. It's the NHL.
right?
Because a guy like Backlund probably isn't good in that role anymore. But Mangiapane and Tyler Toffoli and Blake Coleman, like they've got the makings of a really good second line there if you drop Kadri into the middle of that. So I would say Kadri has kind of always made a little bit of sense for them if they just wanted to say, hey, we're just going to slot all of our guys down one. I'm curious to see what their approach is there. The one thing that I think it opens up with a guy like Shillington, you get a two-way guy. You get a guy that can produce the way that Weegar can offensively. Do you need to sign Shillington, or do you maybe put that guy on the trade market and try and go replace a forward with the Shillington deal?
Right.
I think that's probably the answer, especially, look, they have $9 million in cap right now, but they do need to sign Mangiapane. He just had a 35-goal season even. And that's an easy, like, $4-ish million off your books, probably. So they're rocking with something more closer to $5 million, and they do need to sign Shillington or move him too. So it does get interesting, and I think a lot of teams are in this spot with Nazem Kadri right now, where it's like they almost have enough money to get him, but it just hasn't quite added up to enough, or the fit hasn't quite been there for a team.
Well, as we've seen multiple times in multiple weeks now, if a team truly wants to move money out, they can.
Yeah. Well, and this has kind of been your point now for the last couple of years, right, AJ? Like teams, you have to be smart about what you're doing with your cap. You always have to be cognizant of it. But the NHL and its GMs have shown in the last couple of years, there's no such thing as not being able to get out of a bad contract. Like they've all shown ways to be creative, to do it. That's why, I mentioned it last week, half jokingly, or 2 weeks ago now. I don't even know how long this Kadri thing's been going on. That, I had someone in my mentions, like the Avs should just give him 8 years, $5 million a year, get him to the $40 million mark and deal with it later. And like, I kind of laughed, but like, then you do have that thought. It's like at a certain point, you can always get out of a bad deal or a deal that's gone a little bit too long. And just kind of tying this back, like you said, AJ, deal with that when you need to in a couple of years.
The other side of that is in a world where you're back to seeing the salary cap take significant jumps year over year, bad deals aren't even that bad, right? Like they're just, you deal with them at that point.
They're just deals.
Yeah, there you go. They're just deals. I have a hypothetical I want to get into, but first, we are brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery, the official beer of DNVR. You can get it down at your local liquor store right now. Also, pretty soon, the bar will be finished with the renovations. We have at least one studio up and running there. If you're watching the Broncos shows of late, you can see it looks pretty good. Starting to come together a little bit, so be sure to go check out the bar when they open up for the DNVR Bar 2.0. And, of course, go to breckbrew.com to check out all of their products. Also brought to you by Athletic Greens. I love the balance of giving you beer and Athletic Greens next to each other. They really play off each other well. Athletic Greens is just one scoop. Yeah, there you go. One scoop in the mornings into your cup of water. You drink it. It's got all sorts of amazing stuff for you, ranging from 75 different vitamins and minerals to probiotics, some electrolytes, all sorts of other stuff in there. A ton of athletes use it as just part of their regular routine to make sure it gets their body up and running. It gets their immune system going to help with things like flu season and stuff like that. So Athletic Greens has you covered in pretty much every way. It's just a daily supplement that you can take in the morning. Again, one scoop in your cup of water. You drink a normal cup of water, you're done, you go about your day. It's just like drinking water in the morning anyway. So it's like that, but better for you. You can go check them out today at athleticgreens.com/avalanche to let them know we sent you over there. Once you're there, when you order, you can get 5 free travel packs with your order and a year's supply of vitamin D. So they got you covered all the way top to bottom. Take control of your health today with Athletic Greens. Again, athleticgreens.com/avalanche to let them know we sent you over there. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. Hypothetical I want to get into. I want to start with Meghan. You're the Calgary Flames. Yeah. We'll get to this in a bit. Got to save this one. Just trust me on that. Appreciate the $2 though, Dirk. You're Calgary Flames. You get through this season, and let's say you can only sign one of the two guys in Huberdeau and Weegar. Which one are you keeping?
I guess it's going to depend on this type of season that they each have. Like if Huberdeau has another 100-point season, it's going to be a little easy to convince me of that. But I think that looking at the trajectory in their career, I'm kind of basing this off of playoffs a little bit too. Weegar might be a harder talent to come by. Where more, Huberdeau, he's growing older as a player. I think if you're looking at a long-term future, I might see the value in keeping Weegar in the decor and looking for some other piece to add to the forward depth moving forward.
All right. So we have a soft lean to Huberdeau. Huberdeau or Weegar for you two?
AJ, you got a smirk on your face this whole time. Would you like to go first?
That's
He's
something
about to talk about Alex Newhook for 45 minutes.
Oh.
Let's talk about JT for 45 minutes.
Oh my god.
It's hard because I think Jonathan Huberdeau is a really good player. But I'm still kind of on a little bit of like let's see how he fits there. For me, it's Weegar, and maybe that's a recency bias thing where, we talk so much about how you need your defense to be, solid. And everyone's talking now about how do you find those guys like what the Avs have and what the Lightning have that are at the top of your D that can do both things like we were just talking about with Weegar. So for me, I probably prioritize Weegar if I can only pick one.
Okay.
Yes, you take the defenseman over the wing. Yes, you take a defenseman over a wing. For me, it's if you don't have an elite defense, you're trying to build one. If you're not trying to build one, you're not trying to win. If you're trying to find lessons from watching the Lightning and the Avs win Stanley Cups, it's not that they can score goals and that they've got all these offensive. Oh, these guys. Game six was 2-1. It was 2-1. How many
Even
times
with all the offensive firepower?
How many times have we seen the Tampa Bay Lightning win clinching games 2-1, 1-0, 2-0? It's about your defense. It's about being able to prevent the other team from getting on the board. They've invested huge money and a first-round pick in their goaltending tandem in Florida. They were on the right track. I don't understand the desire to move on from Weegar. It makes no sense to me from that organization's perspective. That's Calgary's boon. That's their benefit. Going into it, they should try and prioritize Weegar. They've got the year to figure it out. Hey, how do these guys fit? Are these guys any good here? Is this going to go well, et cetera, et cetera? But going into it, I understand Huberdeau is a high-end point scorer, but I think some of that is a little smoke and mirrors. Some of that is going to be system. Some of that's going to go away. In Calgary, it's defense. Defense. You've got to build the defense.
I mean, so are you just riding? Are you not panicking on these guys until they're free agents? Because for me, if Calgary gets the deadline and neither of those dudes are extended, I'm concerned. I think they end up in a really tough spot there. Because we talk about it all the time. You look at the Pacific; it's really not a strong division. Calgary should still be at or near the top of that division with what they have. If you're leading the division, you're at the trade deadline, and neither of those dudes are signed, it feels like you're kind of stuck, right? Because you can't move him at a deadline when you're pushing for the playoffs like that.
Well, that's one where you have to get a sense, and you trust the GM. He's had conversations with the guys. He has an idea, okay? We saw with Johnny Gaudreau. It came down to the very last minute for him to decide he didn't want to be in Calgary anymore. That's a disaster for an organization. That's a deep cut that was unsurvivable 2 weeks ago that they've somehow survived. But you're right in that if you get to the deadline and both of those guys are unsigned, it doesn't really matter where you are in the standings. You're tempted. You're tempted to open it up and say, all right, what can I get for these guys?
Yeah.
Because I can get first-round picks for this year's draft. I can get first-round picks for 2024's draft. I could probably get a young player. I could get a nice prospect that we really like. There's going to be a lot on the board because those would be, at their respective positions, very, very, very likely to be the two best players available at the deadline. And we saw, look what Ben Sherratt got at the deadline last year. What the hell do you think MacKenzie Weegar is going to get? It's going to be the same thing. Kirby agrees with me. Tell him, bud.
Yeah.
Really hates Ben Sherratt, confirmed.
Every time I say it, he barks.
Man, that'd be a really tough spot for me. Especially if, Calgary stumbles a little bit. They're in second or third in the Pacific at the deadline. I almost think you might have to move them if they're unsigned at that point. Given what you said.
Well, like for me, this is and it's what AJ just said. This is where you have to trust your management, and you have to trust them to have their pulse on the team, the locker room, the fan base, the coaches. Again, I'm going to go back to Columbus a few years ago. They had Bobrovsky, they had Panarin. They had all kinds of guys that they could have moved on from. Seth Jones, who they ended up moving a couple years later. They have all kinds of guys they could have said, you know what, they're all walking. We're going to tear this down right now. They doubled down. They said, we're going to go for it. If you're the Flames and you're in that situation, you're leading the Pacific, and it's looking like maybe these guys aren't going to come back. To me, that's almost a point where you just say, cool, we're going to go for it. We think the West is vulnerable. We're going to have to beat Colorado. We're going to make some moves that we think help get us there. We have Markstrom in net. We're going to go for it. And even if it causes us to have to kind of reset a little bit in the offseason, you do it. But yeah, if you're out of it, you're fighting for a wild card spot. And these guys are like, I don't know, maybe not. Then I think you have to flip it for assets and just, now it's Tkachuk for 3 firsts.
That makes the decision a lot easier. If they're fighting for a wild card spot or they're really not in it, especially like in the shitty division. If you're fighting for a wild card spot, there's a really good chance that you're fighting for the honor of getting your teeth kicked in Colorado next spring.
Right.
So, let's be real here. That's where that conversation. The rest of the West has not done enough to close that gap on the Avalanche this year, and the Avalanche got worse. The Avalanche are going to be worse on paper going in next year. No matter what, they're going to have question marks. They're going to have uncertainties. There are going to be some problems, but their best players are still on the up. The gap hasn't been closed by the rest of the Western Conference yet, and that's going to help Calgary stay in contention. So I think for right now, it's easy to say, hey, we're just going to keep him and see how this goes. But yeah, unless you really are firmly in first or second place in your division in the Pacific, Calgary should absolutely be moving those guys. But if they are in first, that's the point of this.
Yep.
The whole point of this is to win hockey games and to compete. If they're in first place, they're not moving those guys, regardless of the fear of losing them for nothing. Because if they go and they have a great playoff and they go and win a Stanley Cup, you don't care if those guys walk. You won the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
You got what you wanted.
It's the toughest spot for them to be in too, right? If they're out of it, pretty easy for them to take the backdoor rebuild route where it's like, oh, well, we just get all these assets and that was the plan all along. But the risk of going for it is just so high for them. If they end up being a second round exit, that's where it's like, oh boy, now they might have to rebuild without all of the assets from these guys.
I'd have to imagine that they're going to get one of these guys signed. If either guy is willing to stay there, which they did introductory press conferences today, and I guess the guys had positive stuff to say.
I mean,
of course. But if
I'm really upset about the deal. I really hate Calgary as a city. This is bullshit. I'm big mad about it. I don't think this is okay. I'm not signing. F this.
For players to speak their mind though, we've had multiple. I mean, we're literally talking about a player that just did that. I probably don't have much interest in staying here long term. So, the fact that they had positive things to say and didn't just do well, we'll see, we'll get into the season and we'll see. But they were either way, regardless from going, this is if you really do feel like it's realistic for you to at least keep one of them, I think they need to address that sooner rather than later. Maybe not for both. You need to get something done with one of them.
So let's take a poll here. Where would you rather live? Calgary or Sunrise, Florida? I'm not giving you Miami. You have to live in Sunrise.
Calgary.
Rudo, don't even ask me. You already know what I'm saying.
Megan?
We talked about the tax conversation, I think, in past pods. So I feel like there's some monetary incentives with Florida in general. I've not been to Calgary personally. Because of who I am as a person, I think I might lean Calgary.
Oh, my God.
Megan doesn't care about the money. Confirmed.
I'd be in a hub. I would love that.
You guys are picking Calgary, Alberta over South Florida.
Not a chance.
AJ, I get. I know you're not the warm weather person, all that stuff, but
I like Arizona. I'd take Arizona over Calgary.
Is it the humidity?
It's partially humidity, Florida? And it's partially that it's Florida.
I'm taking Florida over Calgary.
Also partially that, I guess having not been there, but Calgary gets compared to Denver in a lot of ways. So I could probably be pretty comfortable there.
I've heard that.
So, and living in Canada would rock. It's a great country, great people. Alberta, but Calgary, I would love Calgary. Canada owns, so I would.
Megan, you were going to say something when I was talking about getting one of them signed.
There's something I've been sitting on from the first segment that came to be, and I don't know what they're going to be named this season, but the Stockton Heat finished first in the Pacific Division, and they had a pretty competitive playoff run. And they also get a new prospect to add with Cole Schwindt being a part of this deal. whatever they're going to be called this year, their AHL team is building and growing stronger too. And I think we've talked about why Tampa has been successful, and it's because they've invested in that development system. And it's almost a boon to Calgary's development system to invest in that a little bit too. They have a good team that's coming up in the ranks that is also, it bodes well for the future of Calgary with a pretty competitive AHL team in the works as well. And so when I think about who won the trade, I kind of didn't factor that in, but I think that also just makes this better for Calgary. And I think that this is a team that's making moves with some flexibility. Like, you obviously want them to get one of these two re-signed at some point, but they're also highly motivated to incentivize these players to want to continue being there. And some of that comes with a promise of a better future too, because they want to be looking at long term. And so that does start with seeing a team that invests in its AHL development as well.
It's a really good point with Peltier actually absolutely destroyed the AHL last year. So they have that. Connor Zary's on the list. On the defensive end, they have Jan Kuznetsov, excuse me. So there are, I do think it will be curious how Calgary looks to use some of those prospects at the NHL level this year.
Well, and I love that point because, again, we just talked a minute ago about teams trying to emulate Colorado and Tampa. And obviously, Colorado not quite to the extent that Tampa, but I mean, like, you look at that team, how much of that is homegrown talent that matriculated up through the AHL. The Avs have examples of that. Alex Newhook, Mikko Rantanen, Pavel Francouz, JT Compher, little bit of time with the in San Antonio, but so teams are trying to emulate that. I think that's a great point. It's not insignificant. And you look at like what Buffalo is doing right now. Like, the Rochester Americans have, or at least this past season, had so many high-end AHL players that they're hoping turn into real players for the Buffalo Sabres. So no, I think it's a good point. It's good to get
Okay. Do want to talk about Florida's side of this. I feel like we kind of skipped over some of the things they're running into a little bit, but we are brought to you by FOCO. DNVR is teaming up with FOCO so you can secure your access to the best collectibles and gear from all of the major sports teams here in Colorado, whether it's Broncos, Nuggets, Avs, Rockies, even Buffs, Rapids, stuff like that. You can go to FOCO and get what you love. They've got you covered for all of the Colorado merchandise. You can get 10% off when you use code DNVR over at foco.com. That's FOCO.com. Or you can just go down in the description, click the YouTube link down there to go to FOCO. They've got all sorts of stuff: men, women, children's clothing, bobbleheads, swimsuits, Crocs. I saw y'all talking about Crocs in the chat earlier. If you want Avalanche Crocs, FOCO's your place to go. Jesse, I know, is a big Croc guy.
I was going to say, I'm a big – if Crocs is listening, I'm your boy. Big Crocs guy.
Let's go. That's going to be a brand new sponsor soon. So hit up FOCO today. Again, it's FOCO.com to order on the line with them. And then you can go on over to Evoca TV, evoca.tv, EVOCA.tv, to get television here in the Denver metro area. Unfortunately, the altitude Comcast thing has not really resolved despite the recent talks. So if you want to get altitude, Evoca's the way to do it. Just $15 a month for the first 3 months with code DNVR, and only $25 a month after that. And it's not just altitude. It's got Rocky Mountain Sports Network. It's got the national channels. So it has you covered for watching all of the major sports here in Colorado. You're taken care of with Evoca. It's super easy to use. Just a box you plug into the internet and you plug right into your TV. You turn the TV on, you're good to go, you're watching your sports, you're feeling good on your couch. So hit them up today. Again, that's evoca.tv/DNVR to get the first 3 months for just $15. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. So my concern for Florida is that their defense is just bad now. And don't get me wrong, they still have Aaron Ekblad. He's still very, very good. I still love Aaron Ekblad. But who are they going to put next to him? Brandon Montour? I love Brandon Montour. He's my guy. He had a great season last year. That guy is not a first-pairing defenseman. Radko Gudas? I hope you don't put him on your first pair.
Radko Gudas. He's that good.
Jeez. But that's what I'm saying. Like, they They shot a giant hole into their defense, and I don't see how they replace it.
Yep, that's the rub. From their postseason defense, they've lost Ben Sherratt and MacKenzie Weegar.
Yep.
Does this feel to anyone else? You know, we've talked the last couple. We talked a lot this year, and obviously benefit of hindsight, right? That the Avs didn't panic after a second round exit last year. Another second round exit. Tampa didn't panic after they got bounced by Columbus. Again, you traded for Matthew Tkachuk, so like you're not upset about it. You added Matthew Tkachuk, but does this maybe feel like Florida went out and they got bopped a little bit, and they're like, we have to completely. This isn't it. We didn't have it, and they just sweeping changes for the sake of sweeping changes.
It's weird, right? Because this offseason felt like every offseason in recent memory to me for Florida, where it's like, okay, they somehow keep adding forwards.
Right.
They've needed defensemen for years, but they just keep adding forwards, so I guess this is fine. And honestly, like I think it showed in the playoffs against that Tampa team, where you can have all the forwards in the world. It doesn't matter if the other goaltender plays out of their mind and your defense can't keep up. So, tough spot.
I didn't know if AJ would go with something there at the very end of that, but yeah, I mean, you know, someone just saying they just kept adding forwards. This is the first time this person feels a little different. Like they added
definitely another level for sure.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, like even when they added Claude Giroux, like that's a really good player, but it was like, yeah, you kind of already have guys that do what Claude Giroux does.
Yep.
Don't have anyone that does Matt. No one does what Matthew Tkachuk does.
It's fair. It's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean that's still a really good forward core, man. You add Matt Tkachuk to it. Yeah. It's still really good. Like
for sure.
Matt, you've got Tkachuk with Barkov and Verhaeghe and Reinhart. If he ever gets healthy, Anthony Duclair was nasty. Anton Lundell had a really good rookie year. He'll get better. There's I don't know, man. I just don't know defensively. I don't know what they're going to do there because Radko Gudas just isn't it. He's never been it. So teams keep trying it because he's big and mean, but he gets walked a little too easily. So, you know, he gets walked about as often as Rex does. And
that's a lot.
You guys walk Rex pretty frequently, so
man, I didn't know if that was a shot at Rudo for not taking his dog on walks, or if that was a shot at MacKenzie Weegar. I wasn't sure where we were going.
No, Gudas gets eaten up a little too much, so he's just not my jam. He just can't be a guy there. I don't know what else they're going to do on that defense, but they're worse because there's no MacKenzie Weegar. So people will watch this pod and think that it's going to sound like we think MacKenzie Weegar is like a top 10 defenseman, but he's a really good player that they have no replacement for.
I mean, I don't like.
It's just hard to take that big of a step back at such an important position.
I think he's fairly comparable to Devon Taves.
Devon Taves is quite a bit better.
I would say he's better, but I wouldn't say by quite a bit.
I would say by quite a bit. And he is Devon Taves does a lot of really obvious things at a really high level. MacKenzie Weegar does not. MacKenzie Weegar is a lot more of a he's got to be your speed kind of guy. Because he's a guy that when he makes mistakes, he'll make the big one. He's got a little bit of that Jake Gardner in him where he'll make the big mistake, and that's what people will remember. And that's why people will think that Radko Gudas is better than him, which is crazy. But Devon Taves doesn't usually make the big mistake. Devon Taves just doesn't do mistakes. That's what happens when you're top human. So MacKenzie Weegar is a really good player, but I would not compare him to Devon Taves. It's become kind of the in vogue the comparison for underrated D-man that I just didn't appreciate enough. As everybody's like, oh, it's going to be the next Devon Toews. No. Devon Toews, top human. He's not in the group of top humans.
All right.
He's top human. Number one.
Asked the wrong guy that question. Got it. The part that scares me for Florida is they're putting together this defense, and it's not like they have Igor Shesterkin back there. They have
a lot of pressure on Bobrovsky.
Exactly. A total mystery bag of who is Bobrovsky next year. You have no idea what that guy's going to do for you.
Probably be a top 10 goalie like he has been most of his career.
Except for most of his time in Florida.
I think he was pretty good last year. I don't think he was.
He was like league average last year.
He's not $10 million good is the problem.
For sure. What was that, Megan?
It was 913 save percentage regular season, 911 in the playoffs.
So that's pretty average.
He's 33. It's not horrible, but that is just a lot of pressure. You don't have to break Igor in front of him.
It's terrible for the contract. It's fine.
Yeah, like he's
contract.
It's fine. But yes, 100% agree. For $10 million, dude. You need to move him. You need to move him, and you need to give that job to Spencer Knight.
Right. Who had a 908 last year.
That was the craziest part. Did they sign Bobrovsky and then draft Knight, or was it the other way around?
No, they did them all in the same offseason.
Yeah. And it was just
when you draft a goaltender, like you're expecting him to, it's like, hey, it's probably going to be 4 or 5 years. Spencer Knight was just
on another level,
really dominant.
Yep.
At every level other than the NHL. So
it's
how it goes sometimes, it was they tried to limit Knight as much as they could, and it was just like, wow, he's just really good.
Certainly an interesting spot for both teams. We do have a couple super chats, but Jesse, you can go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so because I know we're getting near the 50-minute mark, so we're going to start winding this down. But I do want to just take a step back and a little bit of like what we have the show titled as. Like I was looking at that list of teams. I'm trying to get it pulled up here in a haste.
The Western Conference.
Well, that Tkachuk had essentially said, these are the teams I'm going to go to, and it was like Vegas, St. Louis. And again, my phone's not playing, but it was all. Nashville was another one of them. Dallas, and it's like Central Division team, Central Division, Central.
What's this guy have against the Abs?
Right, and then there was one Eastern Conference team, and it was Florida. There were two teams on this list that weren't in the Central Division. It was Vegas and the Panthers, and just I don't want to get too carried away because of what some of these teams would have had to give, like for what the Blues would have had to give up to get Tkachuk. I think it would have been one of those kind of what we're talking about with Florida, right? Maybe taking a step back to try to take a step forward later, but just like how big it is for a player of this caliber to end up not only not in the Central Division, but in the Eastern Conference, and then to sign an 8-year deal to stay there. Like, Avs just aren't going to have to worry about a very, very good player who's a very hard player to play against unless they see him in the Cup Finals for at least another decade. So that was huge for it to shake that way.
I think the toughness to play against is the great point because don't get me wrong, the Avs don't want to play against Huberdeau either, but Huberdeau isn't going to grind you into dust along the boards. It feels a little bit easier to play against, certainly.
One, he actually keeps his mouthpiece in his fucking mouth. He's not using it to chew on that damn thing so he can yap all goddamn game long. Like, just the experience of playing against those guys is very different.
Yeah.
So, Tkachuk, I love what Tkachuk will bring for the Panthers. I think he's going to be really good for them. I think he is going to make them a little more dynamic in a different way. A little more well-rounded, which is something we talked about the Avs needing to get over the years, is they've got to add a little bit of that element. You do need a little bit of the sandpaper element to your game, but the Zach Cassians of the world aren't the answer. It's the Matt Tkachuks. It's the guys. It's the guys who can actually play while maintaining that edge. It's Tkachuk, it's Kadri, it's those guys that drive other teams crazy by existing.
And to give Florida a little bit of credit there, they've done a decent job of building that. A guy like Sam Bennett does a little bit of that as well.
Exactly.
So they have rounded out their forward core very nicely.
Yeah, I think their forward core continues to look great. When Duclair comes back from injury, it will continue to look great. And that's with a bunch of their picks just not really panning out. They just traded Owen Tippett. Denisenko hasn't done a whole lot. They just keep drafting forward after forward after forward and not doing a whole lot for them.
They made it work on the front end side at the very least. So let's get to these super chats here so AJ can rant about Alex Newhook. $2 from Dirk saying, how does Newhook figure into Kadri's contract?
Doesn't.
Yeah, it's kind of on two different conversations, right?
Yeah, Kadri's contract is a totally separate thing. Do the Avs believe that Alex Newhook can take the 2C job? If they do, they didn't hint at it very much with his postseason usage. And I understand that those are different conversations. You're living in that moment. You're okay. This guy's going to play the role that he can play right now. It was a really long season for him. It's the most hockey he's ever played in his life in 1 year. He's probably a little worn down and tired. I get all that, but it's hard for me to believe that a guy that they were playing 6, 7, 8 minutes a night, they're just going to have penciled in for the 2C job next year. They might give him a look. He might be like in the long-term plan, and he should still be. I mean, let's be real. You're still Alex Newhook. He had a good rookie year. Wasn't a transcendent rookie year. He had a good rookie year playing third-line minutes. You look at, like, Matt Boldy got to play next to guys who score goals. He got to play next to Kevin Fiala last year.
Yep. In
the middle of Fiala's career year, Alex Newhook's playing next to JT Compher and Nicolas Aube-Kubel and stuff, So no offense to those guys, but it's a little harder to put up big numbers.
Not Kevin Fiala, for sure.
Yeah, it's harder to put up those kinds of big, shiny numbers. So it's it is a, like, where he figures in next year remains to be seen. The Ben Myers conversation is still there because I'm telling you, like, the people around the league that think Ben Myers is going to be the next Tyler Bozak-ish caliber of talent. Not the same player, but that level of impact in the NHL. There's a lot of people that live and die by the Ben Myers hype. And if Ben Myers can have that kind of a career, that's a 2C conversation, 2C-ish conversation. So Newhook and Myers are going to have to sort that out between themselves, really. Like, somebody's got to separate there. With 5 of the top 6 jobs locked up, and that's just me projecting that McKinnon will eventually sign an extension here.
And that's the thing about this conversation is, look, I'm a big believer in Newhook. I think he can be that 2C for you, but you don't not make your team better because Newhook might be that guy.
That was a lot of qualifiers, but yes, exactly. I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Yeah, Nazem Kadri makes you better today if you could sign him.
For sure.
And you don't give Newhook that spot when you can put Kadri in that spot. Now, 2 years down the road, if Kadri starts to fall off, then you can have that conversation. But right now, today, Nazem Kadri is significantly more impactful than Alex Newhook is.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Big time.
The other thing to keep in mind, I mentioned this last week, like, I think because Newhook came into the playoffs the year before, looked all right, I just think that maybe we had some different expectations for not necessarily him, but the way he would be deployed. And, like, I forgot at times last year, this is his first year in the NHL. And you're asking him to eventually become a second-line center. I don't know, and maybe you guys can prove me wrong here, but I can't think of a ton of players who jump straight into the NHL and just kind of settle right into that role. I expect him to take. I do expect Newhook to take a big step this year and to start pushing in that conversation. And I do think that because he's part of their long-term plan is part of the reason why this Kadri thing hasn't gotten done. Like, I think they're looking at him saying, like, we'd love to bring Kadri back, but we think maybe not in the immediate, maybe not next week, but maybe next summer we have some internal options that we're comfortable with there.
Well,
look,
that's a big conversation in going out and getting a Paul Stastny, an Evan Rodriguez, and said a guy that you see, look, maybe more realistically transferring to a 3C position for you instead of paying Kadri $7 million. You're going to have a hard time putting a $7 million guy on your third line.
Yeah. I mean, Toronto had a hard time putting a $4.5 million guy on their third line.
Yep. Very, very true. We do have one other super chat here. $5 from Chris saying, can we sign Kadri to a smaller deal to this year with a bigger AAV after that to work the cap without trading? Like, theoretically, you could sign him to a 1-year deal and then sign him to a bigger one after that, but very, very unlikely. Kadri, I will be shocked if Kadri takes a deal that's less than like 4 years.
Yeah, same.
I mean, it's tough to bet on yourself after you just had your career year.
Right.
Yeah. And just to cover the bases, in case the question was asking if they could sign him to a contract like $1 million this year with $10 million next year, the NHL doesn't work that way. So that would be a no.
The AAV is the total value of the contract.
Yep.
So.
How the balance of the money and how it all shakes out, there are rules in place to keep it from manipulating that, because that's what those 15-year, 12-year contracts were all about. Was we're going to pay that guy $1 million at the end of it
6 years, and it brings the AAV down by like $4 million. Yeah,
right.
I believe
the Kovalchuk contract.
I believe year over year the salary cannot change by more than 40% as well.
Yeah, there's a year over year limit to keep it from fluctuating too much.
Yep.
Just so about this Evan Rodriguez thing, I really did want to touch on it because I suggested it because I like the player a lot. And then there's been a bunch of people who are like, why don't the odds like Evan Rodriguez? Like, what's going on here? Like, he's an obvious guy for this, right? That was a guy that was like his year got a lot worse as it went on. He was really good in the first half of the year, and everybody was like, Evan Rodriguez. And then by the end of the year, legitimately, he was playing 12 minutes a night in Pittsburgh.
He's like expensive Danton Heinen.
Like, did Danton Heinen go anywhere? Has he?
Not yet.
This Kadri thing, man. Anyway, so for all the peeps, like, I personally am an Evan Rodriguez fan, and I like the idea of it, but it would come with a pretty significant risk. But by the end of the year, he was like, he had hardcore hit a wall. And if you look at his splits, he had 32 points in 46 games before the All-Star break, 11 points in 36 games after. So a lot of variance there, and it mainly comes with the goal scoring. He went from 15 goals in 46 games to 4 goals in 36 games, and it wasn't like the shooting percentage was astronomical at the start.
Who that sounds like to me? JT Compher.
Well, the guy that Alex Newhook is desperately trying to prove he's not.
True enough. $20 coming in late from Cygnus here, who says, winks at AJ. Love you, buddy.
Love you too, dog.
Okay.
He's only saying that because I got married today.
I didn't want to just throw it out there, but congratulations.
Like, you just dropping it on everybody. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God.
He knew that. He already knew.
AJ's officially off the board, so
it's true.
Congrats, buddy.
Yeah, it was cool.
I was expecting other people to join in the applause there, so I was going to look like an idiot. But
all three of us, really.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
happy for you, man. I was bummed that it didn't work out over the weekend.
Yeah, it was cool. We found a place that we could get a last minute appointment, and we rolled in this morning and paid $30 to get married.
It's a good
and they had like different like wall placements for people that are doing it like we were, where they were like, "Do you want to take pictures?" And we're like, I guess we should. For immigration purposes, I guess we should. Like, yeah, let's do this thing. So, yeah, no, we had a...
That's so funny.
Yeah, pretty cool. It's the reason why it wasn't a bigger deal is that it's been almost 3 years in the works. So, if it seems like I'm nonchalant about it, it's because we, we've been at
been a
this
long
for a while.
time coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you really been engaged for 3 years?
Almost, dude. I remember that. Yeah, we got engaged August of 2019.
Jeez.
Yeah, pandemic started. Pandemic started in March of 2020. Like here, I guess, is really when we all mark it as March of 2020, and then it just sort of shut our world down. So, pretty cool. No wedding registry. We don't want anything from anybody. None of that. I've had to tell a lot of people, no, thank you. We're good. Between the two of us, we own what we need to own, and we're just happy. We're just happy to be married, honestly. And I never have to call her my fiance again. I was so sick of it.
It's just such I'm in the process of that, and it's just such a clunky word.
Seriously.
It's weird calling her the wife to people.
Yeah. So
yeah, see, but that's just wife. Yeah. One syllable.
It's better. It's better, for sure.
Yeah. And it's cool, and I'm excited for the next 40 or so years with her. It's gonna rule.
Let's go. On that note, any final thoughts on the Avs, the market, Tkachuk, whatever you guys want to hit in the hockey world?
I wish there was more happening right now, man. Right now, it just feels so dead. Look, this lightning bolt of a trade was great because it gave us all life again. It gave us all reason to feel something again. But now we're back to this weird ass Kadri situation, which is turning into an unprecedented high end free agent. We're now into almost 2 full weeks of this. Free agency was on the 13th.
Tomorrow will be 2 full weeks. Yeah.
So yeah, you're talking like this is starting to get a little silly, to be honest with you, because what's gonna change? Teams that continues to be teams need to move money. Why do teams need to move money? He can sign a deal, and then those teams can make whatever move they need to. And every time I say that, there's always the one guy in the back who's like, but the team loses leverage. Yeah, the team doesn't have any leverage anyway.
They'd have made a trade already if they had leverage.
Everybody knows that if the Avalanche are trying to dump a contract, what's up?
Well, not even just the Avalanche, just in general. Yeah,
the Islanders are trying to dump money. They know what's up.
Right. I was thinking about that this morning, riding the bike, listening to just some pods and stuff from the end of last week. And, different guys are bringing this up. Oh, well, they don't want to blah, blah, blah. They don't want to be given up that they're trying to go after this guy. It's like, yeah, but if someone calls you hey, do you want this player who's decent, who has a, I don't know, convenient salary number for, I don't need anything in return, just some picks. You know what they're doing.
Hey, cool. Guys, we're not trying to get rid of Sam Girard here, but I'm telling you, we're thinking about maybe let's move on from JT Compher's $3.5 million. And, the guy was great for us in the postseason, and we can't really replace him internally. But I mean, if you want to just give us a 3rd round pick, we'll take that.
Right.
And the other team is
just say yes before I change my mind. Yeah.
I don't even know why I'm doing this deal. Okay, I'm just bored.
Yeah.
Chris McFarland is bored already. He's 2 weeks on the job, and he's like, "Is this what it's like every summer? Oh my god, I've got to make some phone calls. I've got to offer trades."
Do you think in the GM group chat, every time Joe Sakic or Lou Lamoriello says anything, they all just hit him with the stop emoji?
How about you sign your guy first, and then we'll talk?
Yeah, exactly.
Megan,
any
saying Bob Hartley?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the chat.
Wasn't either.
Oh, someone asked who their coach was in 01.
Oh. I was like, did Bob Hartley get a job?
His son is a coach, I believe, in the AHL.
Give me some final thoughts that have nothing to do with Bob Hartley, please.
I liked earlier, Jesse kind of tied it back into the title of this show, and especially addressing the landscape of the West, because the landscape of the East has changed so much. That's where a lot of big names ended up. Gaudreau goes east, Tkachuk goes east, even Chicago shipped Doc and DeBrincat east. And then just big names, Kopp remains east. It's not really changed the landscape of the Western Conference. And it's been so quiet on this side of things that it kind of bodes well for the Avs because they'll remain kind of at the top here as competition within the Western Conference. But it's also frustratingly quiet right now. It might stay relatively unchanged for the duration of the summer, and the Eastern Conference is just going to be an absolute nightmare next season.
Well, it needed it. It needed the talent infusion because when you have splits that large between your playoff and non-playoff teams, you got to do something to close that gap.
Well, and look, you've got 3 straight years of the Tampa Bay Lightning being the no doubt best team in the East, 3 straight years of them in the Cup final. And the year before that, they ran away with the President's Trophy and the Eastern Conference, regardless of what happened in the playoffs. You're going on 5 years of teams trying to chase down Tampa, and they haven't been able to do it. So like AJ just said, they something had to happen. Something had to give. There had to be a big injection of talent, skill, something, because you're going on half a decade here of Tampa being the team in the East.
Yeah. So maybe it's time for some new kings to reign out east. In the West, it feels like Avs still comfortable at the top, though.
Yeah, and I think to tie it all back together here, the amazing part of this deal, this Tkachuk trade, is that the Flames genuinely might have done a good enough job in this trade alone to keep themselves afloat at top the Pacific Division, because this helps mitigate the Gaudreau Tkachuk duo loss by, okay, well, you lose 200-point players, but you get one back, but then you also get a top pairing defenseman.
Yep.
So that's a pretty good way to mitigate that loss there. And has Edmonton gotten significantly better? We'll see how Jack Campbell does in net. We'll see how Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard are as the 2-3 in Edmonton. We'll see how it goes. I think there's reason for optimism, but until the Oilers obviously prove it, it's going to be the skepticism is still going to dominate there. And can Evander Kane do it again for an entire season? Can he keep it together? Can he keep his head above water? Yeah, can he not self-sabotage by doing something just incredibly selfish and stupid? Because, it couldn't even get through last season. He ends the series getting suspended because he wants to take a run at Nazem Kadri. He does it, and he gets what he wants. He got his pound of flesh, and okay. But it is interesting, that Pacific Division. Vegas will be better by default just because they're healthy. How good will they be? We don't know.
Yeah.
Robin Leonard could be seriously injured to the point where they're running out Laurent Brossoit and Logan Thompson as their duo for 30 games. It could be a real thing with Robin Leonard. Robin Leonard could be totally fine by the start of the season. We don't really know. So the Pacific Division just remains question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. And the deer doesn't think anything anymore. That's why he's on the wall.
So let me ask you guys about the Pacific. It's Monday. We have nothing to talk about in the offseason.
Yeah, totally, man. Totally.
Is there any order that the teams could finish in the Pacific that would surprise you?
Yeah, like LA winning it would surprise me.
Really?
It wouldn't surprise me that much.
Yeah,
I think it would because their defense still has a long way to go.
I think I'd be more surprised if San Jose won.
Well, I'm ignoring like the obvious, like bad team makes miraculous run, like but for some reason San Jose thinks that to solve their goaltending problem that they've had for a decade, that they are trying to sign 8 goaltenders. Like, have you guys looked at their goalie depth chart?
Can't scout them if you don't know who's going to be in net.
Dude, it's the weirdest shit. Like, I don't know if you guys have taken a look at it, but seriously, the Sharks goalie depth right now is they've got Capo Kakinen, James Reimer, Aiden Hill, Aaron Dell. That right there, like 4 dudes, okay? And then they've got these other the guy that they traded for the Brent Burns deal. They've got Strauss Mann, who amazing name, was great in college hockey last year. And then I don't know, some guy I've never heard of. So that guy, not surprising. Whatever. But like that's a lot of NHL contracts for the goaltender position. Like normally you get 2 in the NHL, then you have 3 guys for the AHL. One of them will play in the ECHL, maybe 4 if you're deep at it, and it just seems like it's a lot. Like it's a lot there.
Well, the part to me that always surprises me about like when you see situations like that and depth charts start to look like that, it's like, how are you getting these guys to sign there?
Yeah.
Like, hey, do you want to come be part of this 9 goaltender tandem that we've got going here? It's like, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, what's the upside there? Like, they all are like, oh, I could go be the starter there. But it's like, you got to beat out 5 dudes. And if you don't, then you just got to wait for one of them to get hurt, not play very well. Like, that's a bad numbers game.
Every night up in Loveland, it's going to be like the Eagles are playing another Sharks goaltender tonight.
Dude, they're going to loan all of them out to the entire division.
Yeah.
The Eagles are going to call him up and be like, we really don't want to play Jonas Johansson anymore. What's Aiden Hill up to? Can we borrow him? Yeah, like it's just a weird depth chart that they've got going on out there. But I totally derailed us here. But yes, the reality here is the order of finish in the Pacific. I'm open to a lot of things. But I think there are 3 clear-cut best teams out there. I think it's Vegas. I think it's Calgary. I think it's Edmonton. I think LA is a playoff caliber team somewhere in there. I just don't think that they're win the division good. And then Anaheim, I don't understand. They still have all this money to spend. They spent some of it on like Ryan Strome.
They're in a really weird spot.
It's kind of
Still my dark horse team for Kadri. And this is the exact type of team I was talking about last week, where it's like the longer this goes on, you are going to get a team like Anaheim, like 4 years, $8 million. Just like something silly that Kadri can't say no to. And, they'll be competitive enough. But, yeah, no, it's a great point, AJ. Are they even to the floor yet?
No. They need to spend almost $5 million to get to the floor.
They're at $25 million in cap space, man. They've got room. So, which is like, why were they so stingy with Sonny Milano? Why is that guy a free agent?
Right.
You had all the space. Like, what's the issue here? No, I do wonder about a team. I wonder about like a Buffalo. Hey, these guys have money. They would like to win. He could go back and be close to home. Obviously, that's not like the contender. Like, it doesn't check that box. But all those young guys, he could play down the middle of the ice. He could be a transformational personality for them there. This Kadri thing, it just continues to be weird to me for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. Like, there doesn't seem like he knows what the offers are. He knows what the teams that are interested are. He knows what he's looking at. The teams all know the score here. They all know that the other teams that are there. Like, what are we doing here? It's not even just Kadri. John Klingberg is still sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're like, when has free agency ever seen top guys at center and defense just sort of
5
sit
and
there?
2 weeks later? Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's like a couple of guys on the defensive side too. Klingberg, the biggest one, but Subban's out there still. DeHaan's out there still. A couple other smaller pieces as well.
There's a reason that I think these guys are all out there. Like we saw Nino Niederreiter signed in Nashville, which I thought was a great pickup for the Preds. But other than that, there's been almost no movement with a bunch of good forwards.
Yep.
Like either we're headed towards some guys getting PTOs or some guys getting August 1-year deals or something. Like we could be headed to something weird, but it all I think starts with this Nazem Kadri, John Klingberg. Like these guys have to make decisions because that trickle down effect will happen. Okay, well if Detroit really wants John Klingberg, but they don't get him, well PK Subban is a reasonable backup option there.
Yep.
You know, and a team that wants John Klingberg but doesn't get him and then decides, hey, we just want a cheap option on defense. Calvin DeHaan is a cheap option on defense.
Options are there for sure.
So, you know, stylistically, not going to be the same. Like Subban and Klingberg could kind of play the same role, but if you're just looking for a warm body here, if you're just looking for, hey, we want a veteran guy to play that role, you start at the top, work your way down. You know, the trickle down effect of it is of both positions. It's very real.
What do you
and
think?
It's weird to see it continue.
What do you guys think PK Subban signs for? Now that this has gone on this long.
I think it's going to be a lot like last year, like Ryan Murray last year, where I think it's going to be about a year. I think it'll probably be $2 million, $3 million at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just to your point, man. Like just a guy like Sonny Milano. Like the fact that you're talking about that guy potentially for like a PTO. It's like, what is going on in the NHL right now?
Yeah.
Where like there's some of these guys that just aren't getting. Is the market waiting that much for Nazem Kadri?
Well, I think in some ways you could think that it is because what those teams are doing, you know, the teams that are waiting for a guy like that. You know, you look at Nazem Kadri. Okay, you don't get Nazem Kadri. Right? Paul Stastny and Evan Rodriguez are legitimate center options for a team that misses out on Kadri. And then, you know, the wing options are a little bit different because Rodriguez, Stastny could both play wing. Phil Kessel, I guess, is still out there. But Sonny Milano, Danton Heinen, like there are some actual players here.
I mean, you even have like potentially Patrice Bergeron floating around.
I mean, you don't really. But
I know he's going to go to Boston,
but you do have like a guy that was like coveted at the deadline last year. Johan Larsson is just sitting there unsigned. And you're like, this is a guy that teams loved at the deadline for a 4C job. Like, obviously, he's hard capped as to what he is. But these are the guys that get scooped up in the first hour of free agency every year.
So, the Patrice Bergeron, and again, I'm only saying this because of what a weird free agency this has been, and we've just kind of seen AJ already used the word, so I get permission to use it. Unprecedented.
Yeah.
It's mostly a COVID joke because that was how everyone described 2 straight years. It's like it's pretty precedented at this point. But you know,
we call this normal.
Yeah. You know, just the way that we've seen this free agency shake out. Like, I don't know. At this point, I'm not ruling out again. Like I said, what you could see happen with Nazem Kadri. Like, could Patrice Bergeron just suddenly be like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go to Colorado and play on a 1-year deal and try to win a cup. I don't think he's not coming to the Avs. I'm just using it as the example. But, you know, I mean, like the longer this goes on, why not? Why wouldn't that happen?
it just gives more time for something weird, right?
Right.
All right. We're about 80 minutes in, so I'm going to wrap us up on this one. Appreciate y'all. We do have Evan doing a mailbag, should be up tonight, so be sure to go read that. If you didn't get your question in with him,
it'll be up in like 20 minutes.
Okay, so this afternoon even. If you didn't get your question in with him, we're likely doing a Q&A episode sometime this week, so have your questions ready to go for us, including non-hockey related stuff. That should be a fun episode as well. All the good stuff, get a membership to DNVR. You can still get the Avs championship shirts, whether it be the 22 Cup shirt or the Landeskog 8-bit shirt. Both of those are amazing. Highly recommend you get in on that action. But for today, we are out of here. And until tomorrow, we will talk to you later.